When it comes to learning a new language, specifically, I'm talking about studying Japanese, one of, if not the most important factor is holding an interest in learning that language. Being Canadian, growing up, I had to learn French, and I could not have cared less about learning French. And though I studied at school for like 10 years, basically, maybe a little bit more, French, now as an adult, I cannot speak any French because I didn't care. And even though I studied, I didn't really retain anything because I didn't have an interest. So, when studying a language, so for studying Japanese, because I am so interested, I'm really, really engaged in things, I was able to pick it up way more quickly than I ever picked up anything in French. And it's purely a motivational thing. I like watching anime, I like Japanese music, I like reading manga. So I have motivation to learn Japanese. When it comes to French, I was just told study French and then nothing else. So I really didn't have any motivation. So it's motivation is, in my opinion, the most important thing in what will help you like successfully obtain a language or will stop you from being able to study it well or to retain anything well. Because I like manga so much, manga is one of my favorite like study helpers in that if you read some manga in Japanese every day, it will keep you exposed to written Japanese in all levels, just depending on the manga you are reading. Now, there is more than just like, there's more than manga if you want like additional resources to help you retain written Japanese. There's otome games, if you like those, are a fantastic resource because they're basically like picture books that are read to you, and you sometimes get to choose your own options. They are a fantastic resource if you want to be listening as you read. Fantastic. There's also video games that with text heavy dialogue, like Persona, is also a very good choice. There's magazines, there's a whole bunch of things. However, I like manga, so I'm going to be talking about manga in this video. So I'm going to be recommending 10, mostly shoujo, manga that I think will help Japanese language learners retain some of their Japanese. One of them is seinen. I will be kind of categorizing them as beginner, intermediate, and advanced learner manga, just because, well, I do know like a lot of Japanese resources are categorized in the JLPT N1 through N5. I find it really difficult for me to discern what's an N4 level versus what's an N3 level. I only took N1. I just went right up. So I don't know. I try and guesstimate, but I don't feel like I'm doing anybody any favors because I'm not an expert when it comes to JLPT. I find it easier to talk about if you're just starting to study, you're a beginner, you're comfortable with like hiragana and katakana, you're good with those two. You're beginning to learn kanji, you are starting to get a grasp on the grammar. That kind of area is for beginners. Intermediate is more, okay, you're good with hiragana and katakana, you know quite a bit of kanji, you're comfortable with grammar, and your vocabulary is that of a like day-to-day, like nichijou kaiwa. So like you're comfortable with like standard Japanese, nothing too niche. And then in the advanced category is you are so good at reading both hiragana, katakana, and kanji, and kanji. You can read keigo more or less. You're more or less comfortable. You can at least understand keigo is how I will put it, and you're starting to become more familiar with those niche vocabulary. So like heavy fantasy, those kinds of words, or like basically if you can read Jujutsu Kaisen, I will put you in the advanced category. This is just how I break them up in so I know how to categorize all of my recommendations. Other people might categorize them differently, but basically beginner you're just starting, intermediate you're pretty comfortable with like day-to-day Japanese, advanced you're comfortable with the more niche Japanese, and keigo. I'm putting keigo in the advanced part because it ranges from like kind of intermediate friendly to like what's being said. So I'm just putting it in the advanced for my own sake. So for beginner, my very first recommendation is the seinen, surprisingly, and it's called Cheese Sweet Home. This is a very, very cute, friendly series about a cat. And while there is like the tiniest bit of kanji usage, it's by no means overpowering. The majority of the story is just told in hiragana, I'm pretty sure, and it's all super short sentences. There are so many context clues with the pictures. I don't think you'll ever be all that confused. And if you get confused, it is very easy to look things up in a dictionary because it is not that vocabulary heavy. So the words are not that complicated and there's not that many of them, making it very friendly for beginners. My next one for beginners is Gekkan Shoujo Nozaki-kun. This is a very cute series. If you've watched the anime, you'll be surprised by the format of the manga because it is told in kind of strip style. So while there is kind of an overall story, it's broken down into 4-panel strips. So you don't need to be following a very, very long story where you can forget things that happened. If you don't understand something at the beginning, you won't understand the rest of the whole chapter. Nothing like that. It's told in 4 panels, so all you need to understand are all 4 panels, making it very, very friendly. I find shorter stories are more friendly for beginners because they're just shorter. It's easier to understand the context clues when everything's very close together. Moving on to the intermediate series, I feel like the majority of manga that I talk about on here would be categorized in the intermediate, where most of my romances, especially the high school romances, I would categorize as intermediate friendly. So I just grabbed a couple of my favorites to talk about. First one is Love That's an Understatement. This one I put an intermediate because there is some like slang kind of used, but really not all that much, not unfriendly, but it gives you still like the tiniest bit of a challenge if you're not used to slang. Most of the language is like day-to-day Japanese. While there is kanji usage, there is always furigana at the top, so you'll never be confused, but it still gives you some exposure to the kanji. My next recommendation for intermediate readers is Fall in Love, You False Angels. This one does have a little bit more slang usage than Love That's an Understatement, so still staying within the like high school slice of life, day-to-day nichijou kaiwa Japanese usage, just teetering a little bit more into the slang, especially when like their masks come off if you know the series. Both of them are kind of like delinquent series, which is why there is some slang usage. Just Fall in Love You False Angels flip flops a lot more between like polite language and slang. So there's a wider variety of language usage versus Love That's an Understatement, typically. I'm only talking about my delinquent series here. We have another one, which is Glasses with a Chance of Delinquent. This one surprisingly has a little bit less slang usage than the previous two, but it is still very friendly for intermediate learners. The majority of the language used is, I'll call it like dictionary form or casual Japanese. While there is still some like masu form, the majority is casual without teetering too much into slang. So I feel like this is the good one to start with if you're an intermediate learner. And again, all 3 of these are high school romances. And then one more intermediate series that is not a Yankee series is Pink and Habanero. This one has the least amount of slang usage. The majority of it is just casual or masu polite Japanese. And the story is pretty easy to follow. I think this one is also one of the friendlier ones, but I would start with Glasses with a Chance of Delinquent before anything else. I feel like that's the most friendly in terms of all of these. Pink and Habanero is a little bit more dialogue heavy than the rest of them, but like the tiniest bit. Moving on to my advanced recommendations. So these are ones that will go more towards a particular niche. So not just casual romance, more so fantasy is where I go. But you can also think of like the horror series typically are more advanced, just depending on what they're about. My first recommendation is has a long title. のけもの恋語り、マレケツの娘とあやかし狐. This is a new series, only has one volume out, but I love it so much. This is a fantasy romance set in like past Japan, so it is a historical fantasy series. Lots of keigo usage, lots of talk about war, armies, Japanese folklore, and fantasy creatures. So a lot of very niche language all wrapped up into one, and there is minimal furigana. So there is a little bit of furigana, just minimal. My next recommendation is one that I really love, and I do have the physical. I have the physical for most of these, but I want to show this one off because I love it so much. It's this one called Gin no Mugibatake. This is a fantasy adventure series about witches growing wheat. So this is probably my most like friendly advanced series. So if you want to start off with one of these, I would recommend starting it off with this one. It talks about witches, but there is furigana. So I would highly recommend starting off with this one because the concepts are more difficult. The furigana usage is very, very helpful if you're just starting to get into more advanced series. It kind of helps you focus more on what these difficult words mean rather than how do I read all these difficult words. It makes things a little bit less daunting, in my opinion, at least. And it's a really fun series. So the vocabulary tends to focus on magic and baking. So if you already know like some baking terms, this will be a little bit easier for you. If not, you can still read it. You can do it. My next recommendation does again have furigana, and it is called Yureijo no Danna-sama. This is a little bit more difficult, but again, this one also has furigana, so we can do it. This is a supernatural romance about the master of a ghost house. There is some keigo usage, which is why I kind of pull it over to the advanced side. So this one, you really need to have a good grasp on those like nobility terms. So all of the like how to say like an aristocrat, princess, prince, king, like monarchy, all those kinds of words you'll have to understand. And on top of that, you'll need to be able to understand those like ghostly words to be able to follow along. But if you don't, again, that's okay. There's furigana to help you out, which will allow you to focus on the meanings of the words rather than the readings. And my very last recommendation is one that I really, really love, and it is called The Failure at God's School. This is a very long, like, adventure, kind of romance, but adventure first series about becoming a god. This one, again, also has furigana, but don't let that fool you. This is a really complex series. It talks about basically what it takes to become a god, but the story is very dense and packed full of information. So it talks about like people's body chemistries, people being spirited away, like supernatural elements. It packs a whole bunch of niche elements all into one series. And it is very, very dialogue heavy. So you need to be pretty well rounded in order to be able to successfully understand everything that's happening in this series. It is very complicated, but it's a good series. And again, it has furigana, so we can do it. Even if it didn't have furigana, we could still do it. And these are all 10 of my recommendations. I have a lot more recommendations. These were just 10. And if you want to see my like all of these recommendations and links to samples to check out all of them before reading them yourself, I have everything written down on my blog.